Alright, my name is George Frederick Barr IV, and today I am going to attempt to do my presentation on equal employment opportunity. And I have utilized the case study to accomplish this of Philip J. Tridico versus the District of Columbia. It is a civil action case number 130937. I would just like to acknowledge the rest of the class at this point. How are you? I have not seen you, but we have posted together, and I have enjoyed posting and commenting on your posts. Second, I'd like to speak to the relevancy of discrimination in and on the workplace. Discrimination can be a very bad thing. It can traumatize people and ruin their lives. I myself have been a victim of discrimination on the workplace. I'm a nurse and I am gay, and I often work in a Shark Tank with a bunch of other women who hate you. That's how nursing is. That's why the profession is hard to stay in. It's more the people you work with other than the residents or patients themselves. So personally, when I read this case scenario, it made sense to me, but it was interesting because it was the other side of the gender reverse, being that Philip J. Tridico versus the District of Columbia is all about an officer of the law who has religious beliefs, and he is a Catholic, and he prays and made it publicly known to the rest of the precinct that he didn't want to watch pornos or be the typical police officer. And instead of them assisting him or going along with it or just accepting his religious beliefs, he was persecuted against by his fellow co-workers and his superior, who was a sergeant by the name of Mr. Nickerson. And Mr. Nickerson would call Philip many different names, such as fucking retard. He would use names like PTSD motherfucker, and he would also make comments that he was hearing voices in his head and that he was crazy, and the other officers would join in and continue to bully and make this officer feel like he was not as valuable or liked in his job. And basically, one of his ex-girlfriends did work at the precinct too, and she joined the bandwagon, made some pictures, photocopied pictures of military men and religious type photographs, posted them up on the company billable boards or bullet board, whatever. Posted them up next to the water cooler so everybody would continue to make fun of Officer Philip. And later on, the discrimination kept going on, and then he started bringing it up to his superiors, looking to protect his rights and to decrease some of the anxiety that he was dealing with on a personal level at his job. He did utilize Title number 7, which is all about discrimination in the workplace. He was not able to prove 100% that he was discriminated against because of certain factors. He was saying that they were retaliating against him by moving him to a different precinct, taking him out of one specialty and putting him into motor vehicle specialty. And because of the specialty change, he lost some of his salary. When he went head-to-head with his supervisor, Sergeant Nickerson, that didn't work out so well, and he ended up wanting to be transferred to a different unit or split the relationship. And because he admitted to, having the argument and having to go on to the other job, not getting along with the supervisor, pretty much his whole case that he had going went downhill, and nobody was found guilty of torturing him in the workplace. Um, when I was reading all of this, I did think of back in chapter 3 when I was reading, they had something about sexual harassment, and it was the reasonable woman standard. And what this is, it's what a reasonable woman might consider sexual harassment that constitutes sexual harassment. That's the standard that they would go by. I don't think that that's 100% a good standard because everybody thinks differently and everybody feels differently. So you may say something to one person and they may take it lightheartedly, and then if you turn around and say it to another person, they're going to get offended and they're going to state that it's harassment. So, in application to moving it over to this case with Philip Tridico, you know, he's in a testosterone born, bred environment with police officers and, other servicemen. And the conversations that they hold and the way that they are just buddy buddy, and everybody's calling each other names. And it's a fun joke to call someone a pussy or, a fucking retard or an asshole, anything like that. Guys see that different than other guys see that. So Philip didn't like it, whereas in the other guys in the squad found it to be a normal thing. I've served in the military for 4 years, so I've been a part of that myself and been in a unit where, people call each other all sorts of things, and you just got to learn to take it as part of the job and not let it destroy you. Some people are good at it and some people aren't. And in this case, applying the reasonable woman mentality to this scenario and making it a reasonable man mentality, because that's, there were females there, but it was more so men on men action of discrimination. And some reasonable guys would think that, calling other guys fucking retard or whatever, that's a joke and that's cool, and others just don't. So basically, after reading the whole case study, I didn't agree with the fact that the court allowed the Columbia District to get away with this situation. I feel like Officer Philip Tridico had every right to, cross himself while he was eating his food, because that's kind of why the guy started picking on him, was because he was just praying and doing his little crossy thing, and they started saying, well, are you a crazy person like the Jesus that you serve? And kept picking on him about his religious preference thereafter, which made his daily life not so enjoyable. And, when you work hard to get to a point in your life where you're in a career and you feel like you've arrived, but the only thing that's holding you back from having a good life is the bullying and the discrimination that you're surrounded with in your job, sometimes you can just choose another job, and other times you don't want to choose another job because of the environment that you're in. You'd like to stay local. Nobody really, some people just don't want to leave their area. They just want to provide service around where their family is and what have you. So, going through this for him, it was personal. It was people disrespecting his religious belief, and it was offensive to him that they were picking on him for his army service and, calling him a fucking psycho and a PTSD crazy case. The negative outcomes were that he, at one point, was making $74,000 a year before this whole thing started. And as the time sequenced on through this whole situation, I guess is what we'll call it, he went down in money to where he was basically making $45,000 after the lawsuit as his annual income. So he did, get a change in job, and it did affect him in a negative way. His finances were brought down, and he couldn't prove the relevancy of the retaliation being through the job, because he was stating stuff like, well, he went from a marked patrol car into a non-marked patrol car. He went from a non-marked into a marked. patrol car. Like, I guess before where he was at, he had this car, and then when after these changes started happening and they reassigned him to get him out of the supervision of this person and put him in a new precinct to help change the situation, the human resource, department was working to try to fix the episode. But when they moved him over, usually every cop gets a laptop in their car. He wasn't provided a laptop after the situation. The perks that he was used to of his job changed through this whole ordeal. And so he thought that that was a relevant sign of retaliation, whereas in the courts didn't feel the same way, because basically the way he hinged his response to everything, like a couple things that he said, made it so that they didn't feel that the proper, like the other people had the intent to ruin his life, but basically it just kind of happened. Basically, those are my thoughts about this, and discrimination is a bad thing. It's an eye-opener to see it in another person's point of view and just realize that, you're not the only person that goes through this stuff or has these kind of issues. Even normal people, good, quote unquote, copy guys that have it together, more so than maybe a crazy gay nurse, that they deal with this discrimination as well. It affects them. And from a human resource standpoint, bullying and what comes out of it, it's very hard to prove who did what and where when words get lost in the air. Like, yes, he was able to remember, write down, and convey it, but under Title VII, that's what he was trying to claim, that this was affecting him negatively. And it just didn't work out because there wasn't enough proof for him. And then even afterwards, even though he had these changes, it didn't hold up, I guess, to the court. I see the retaliation, but being a sufferer of this, and usually people get discriminated at a job or an organization, you just keep your mouth shut, you roll with the punches, and you think it's something that you have to deal with. And even though we have laws and legislation that are set up to stop this kind of behavior, it doesn't mean that every single case is going to be enforced to the level that it should be enforced. A lot of times things just get let go, or they just go under the rug. In my line of work, I've had my tires slashed, I've had my car egged, I've had people drive past my house, threaten to kill me, that their boyfriend's going to beat me up. I function in a lot of supervisor capacities in what I do, and I'm very passionate about what's right and what's wrong. So sometimes you're going to meet with opposite forces that don't want to do the right thing, and you got to hold your morals even when it comes into maybe you putting yourself in harm's way for what's right. And then there's times where you can just be arrogant and leave yourself open to be discriminated. If you don't give people stuff to hurt you, if you don't pack their lunchbox per se with the items that they need, that's what I more so take away from this part of life now as an adult. Yes, there are rights and there are wrongs, and people have an obligation to function in a manner that is appropriate, but it doesn't mean they're going to do it. And even if you legally are right, proving it and getting, ting ting, you win, it's very hard to do. Unless it's some blatant thing that's right there, it's hard to prove the discrimination. It was in this case, and in every case that I've been in. I just recently took a job, and within the first day, I didn't even work with some of the girls. And the next day I went to work, they were telling my, biggest boss in the building, that I'm inappropriate, that I was acting out, and all sorts of things. And honestly, I didn't do anything but pass pills, do treatments, chart electronically. And so the next day, I had to make a choice, and I went right in and told the director of nursing, I don't think the temperature of the water in this organization is something good for me, so I'm going to have to back out of it. If I stayed there, I would have been discriminated against for whatever reasons people decide to discriminate against me. And I could have dealt with it for the money because it would have been worth it, but in the long haul, you want to be happy too in life. You don't want to just go to work to make money and be stressed out. I guess that kind of wraps it up. I just, I took a long time to read the case and understand it and try to find some way that he won. But out of it all, in the end, I don't feel like he really did win, and sometimes you're not going to win. So, thank you very much for listening to me babble on about case study Philip J. Trudico versus the District of Columbia. Have a good night, and I'll see you online in class. Bye.